And we have next Snehal.
Let's give a huge round of applause for Snehal.
The last session, right? Awesome. Well, we're talking about a boring topic. I'm just kidding. This is actually the most important topic we'll talk about to end. What a wonderful 2 days. We'll be a little bit relaxed this session. I know the first morning keynote was a little bit high energy. Now it's like, towards the end of the day. So I thought maybe we make this session a little bit light, right? Talk about, obviously the session's on ethics, but we'll talk about the great AI wedding match, the Indian AI wedding match. So jokes a little bit. First scene is the great Indian AI bias. So we have this AI elites matching criteria, right? Must have iPhone 15 Pro Max, entrepreneur, influencer, thought leader, TEDx speaker. Minimum 3 Goa trips a year. Yeah, 16 Pro Max, that's actually better. Starbucks, better than the chai 3-to-1 ratio, right? AI's verdict was insufficient Instagram aesthetic rejected, right? And the poor boy that was the doctor, brilliant doctor in a tier 2 city, saves lives daily, too busy for Instagram and is making amazing masala chai. But the doctor's response was, I was operating in the ICU, not in the Maldives. Right? So then we go to the next scene about the great Indian privacy invasion, right? So when AI becomes your neighborhood auntie, Seema auntie? Right, so neighborhood auntie 2.0. So premium matrimonial AI match report. So Sharmaji's son, last seen analysis was he was on WhatsApp at 3 a.m., right? Instagram likes every gym selfie. Swiggy orders biryani at midnight. And then Netflix watches rom-coms alone, which is very suspicious, right? But the privacy status, what privacy? I mean, data sources, your neighbor's cousin's friend's WhatsApp group, right? So be careful what you post in all these WhatsApp groups, right? Privacy is there. So more detail than your mother's wedding planning Excel sheet. Then we go to the scene 3, which is the black box of confusion. And believe it or not, AI is the same way. There's a lot of black box in there, right? Baked in. So when AI speaks more complex than Sanskrit, what do you have? You have a match compatibility analysis, and the output error is a 404 error. So 2 perfectly compatible people, but unfortunately, 404 match not found. So explanation, if I had to explain this, it's if candidate horoscope is equal to perfect and the family background is excellent, obviously it has to be excellent. The career trajectory is amazing. It'll return, sorry, algorithm says no. I'm sorry, right? So have you tried restarting your Kundli? Right? And then you have the great responsibility game, right? So when everyone plays that digital hot potato, right, in your organization, you have this management, it's saying it's an automated system. Then you have this tech team and saying it's not, that the data was already like that. I mean, it's not my fault, right? And then you have the data team, users wanted this, right? Who has that? The data team or your product team is like, the users wanted it. It's not my fault. And then the sales team, read that terms and condition on page 369. Oh, sorry, 394. So meanwhile, in the real world, your matrimonial sites are still working, your parents are still networking, and your Panditji is still consulting, right? And the society aunties are still matchmaking. That's why Seema auntie is still in business. Right? So then you have this great Indian solution. Perfect matchmaking algorithm version 2.0. So you have 40% AI analysis, 30% parents approval, 20% siblings background check, and then the 10% of the society aunties network, which equals 100% success rate. So if you guys need that, that's there. And then the new features, right? So the bias detection. More balanced than your mom's cooking. Privacy protection is stronger than your dad's Facebook password. Clear explanation is simpler than making Maggie, right? I don't know how you complicate Maggie, but to me, Maggie should be a simple thing. I have friends that really do a lot when they try to make their Maggie. And then shared responsibility, more reliable than your siblings' secret keeping, right? So transition to serious mode. Because AI ethics is like making perfect biryani, right? Obviously, Hyderabad biryani, you can't you can't separate those two things, but it requires the right ingredients, right? And what I mean by that is unbiased data, perfect balance in terms of ethical framework, proper monitoring, oversight, and great responsibility, which allows for accountability. right? So, and just like a good biryani recipe, these principles should be passed on, right? Whether that's your organization, whether that's your personal life, AI plays a big role, and AI ethics plays even a bigger role. Right, so let's talk about the ethical landscape of AI. So there are four I kind of break it down into 4 parts. Every organization needs to talk about bias and fairness, right? Yeah, AI does a lot, but there's a lot of bias as well that's incorporated. The privacy and data protection piece, that's important, right? Every company, data is so important to them. They've been working on it for years, and now all of a sudden, hey, let's just put it in an LLM and see what happens, right? So privacy and data protection is very important. Transparency and explainability. Can you actually explain what is happening? Now that goes back to the black box, right? You really can't explain a black box. Black box is a black box. But you can take certain steps before you use the black box. Right, and I think that's an important aspect of understanding AI ethics. And then obviously, last but not least, accountability and responsibility, so you don't have to play the blame game. So when you're in an organization, it's really important to say, okay, well, let's set these guardrails. Let's actually talk through who's going to be accountable, who's going to be responsible. Because if you don't identify that up front, you will run into a huge wall when it comes to something bad happening. And all it takes is one bad thing to happen, and that's it. You're pretty much done. So that's the landscape of AI ethics. Now, what is the future landscape of AI ethics? AI autonomy, like I mentioned this morning, right? And that's something that ethicists and everyone who is in this space about responsible AI will have to figure out. Because when we have AI autonomy, AI is making that decision. Right? And do we want it to make that decision, right? Or do we not want it to make that decision? So that is something that I think we need more repetitive cycles on. Then we have the societal impact of how does AI affect society long term, right? As I mentioned earlier this morning, I mean, we all know AI is moving at a rapid pace, but how do we take society along with us? Because remember, we're all in different regions of the world. We all have different paths, different journeys, different cultures, different things that are taking place. And so society is something that we have to really think long term. What are the impacts, right? I mean, obviously sustainability being one. I mean, when we're running all of these AI models, there's a lot of water consumption, right? And so we want to make sure that we're taking all of these things into consideration and hopefully and innovate, right? It's not just saying, oh my God, AI is drinking a lot of water and there's a huge water consumption issue going on. But it's about, okay, what are some other ways we can innovate to bring new resources and new solutions to the problems that we have? Then we have the environmental considerations, which I talked about, and then the human-AI interaction, which is how do we enhance the dynamics between humans and AI in coexistence, right? So I've been telling everyone who I've talked to today is that we're going to have to be able to realize that we're not the only people, per se, on a team anymore or living together. Like, if you have kids, your kids are using AI, right? They might even have AI friends. Maybe that sounds a little weird to you right now, but I can assure you that if we don't take the right steps, especially when it comes to kids in terms of ethics, right? You will have things that happen and bad things that happen. So on that note, I want to actually ask, does anyone know what this device is? How many people, raise your hand, think it's a camera? Someone said it's something related to a Mac. If anyone gets this right, I have something for you, huh? Alexa plus, no. No. Okay, so I'll reveal what it is. It's called the world. And you know who created this device? No other than Sam Altman. So Sam Altman launched a company called WorldCoin, and it's called an orb. It's an orb that's called a world. And what it is basically it scans your retinal, everyone's retinal eyeballs to see if you're human or not, right? So Sam is also, he's delivering it's like what we had in the States. Like, we had a company that made the cigarettes, and then we had a company that did cancer research, right? Same company. So Sam is doing the same thing. He's building the LLMs and building AI, but he's also trying to find how are we going to differentiate between human and AI? And that's what this device is, right? So just like I think 4 weeks ago, he launched, it was called WorldCoin. It's actually based off of blockchain, but it's called World now. And the idea of this is at some point, and if we're talking about ethics in the future, right, we will have to tag everything by some sort of identification system, right? Like what we see on TVs and what we see on phone devices, we have to differentiate what is AI versus what is human. And it's going to be very hard to tell. That's why he's trying to stay ahead to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to do that? So that's the innovation in that space. Now, talking about the child example, right? Children. The number one app usage in children and teenagers is AI companion apps. It's almost, the AI companion market is growing. The top app in this is character.ai. I don't know if you guys have heard, but in the States, the character.ai, we had a devastating incident just a couple, I think, months back, where a child actually took his life because of an AI companion, right? So there's concerns in allowing too much to anything, right? Too much of anything is no good. And this is where we have to have a serious conversation. It's like, for apps like these, all of these companion apps, yes, it will be a thing. I mean, the idea for the company's founders, like I can talk for character.ai, they're on a mission to say, if there will be a companion that you chat with that knows everything about you, right? So if that is true, and if the companion gets to the point that knows everything about you, and we call it this super intelligent chatbot, my question to you all is, where does ethics go into this equation, right? If that's where we're headed towards, and if we are trying to figure out, allow AI to know everything about us, every single detail, right? I mean, how hard is it to capture all the data points that you have, where you travel? I mean, if you have a cell phone today, it's very easy to track where you travel. If you have a credit card, it's really easy to see what purchases you made. So there's so much data on you today that's already out there. And I think the biggest question is to really be, understanding of ethics in this situation, right? Like, there will be a time where we're going to have to work through this and have conversations with government stakeholders, with policy advisors, to really have a strong conversation on how we move forward. So the ethics of artificial intelligence, there's 4 ethical dilemmas, and this is from UNESCO's website. But biased AI, right? We have bias is present everywhere, right? If you just Google like the top 10 influential people in the world, the response is all pretty much men, right? So there's a gender bias, right? And that is all data that's just trained that way. Google's data is trained in that way. There's a bias that's there, right? AI justice, like there's a lot of use cases in, AI being used in law firms, right? And that's a concern too. Like, if AI were to make a judgment call on some legal case, right? How ethical is that, right? Is it taking that bias into consideration? Is there a human judgmental bias, right? So there's so many things to think about. I mean, yeah, it's a fast-moving world, but I do appreciate all the folks who are spending time in this space because it helps us slow it down just a little bit. I mean, again, it's all, when it comes to ethics, responsibility, and responsible AI, I always say that global politics and the global environment has a huge play in how things play out, right? So creativity, right? If a lot of artists, especially Hollywood, was on a strike on making videos and making movies, artwork. I mean, if you have someone who died 300 years ago and you use AI to create artwork in that style, right? Whose artwork is it? Is it the person who died? Does that person get the retribution, or is it the person who used AI to make that art? Is that person get? So these are the questions that I think you should also be asking yourselves when you're considering ethics in general. And everyone, I mean, obviously, ethics is not just to AI. Ethics, I'm sure your HR in your companies and your orgs, you're taking ethics in IT, ethics in HR, and all of that, right? It's really asking yourself that. And then obviously autonomous decisions, right? That's a classic dilemma. So if you talk about autonomous vehicles, I have a Tesla and I say, if I put my Tesla on full self-driving and I come to an incident, the classic example is, if you have two people in front of the car, one is an older person and one is a young person, who is it going to choose, right? That's a dilemma. Because AI is not going to be able to, it will just make that decision at that point on what, right? So that's these are 4 dilemmas that were in AI. I mean, if you study the topic of AI ethics, these dilemmas are pretty much the standard, right? And there's lots of conversations around these 4 popular dilemmas in AI. So this is what I was talking about. And this is a teenager that died, committed suicide because of character.ai. And I bring this up because it's not all fun and games. When things happen like this, and if it starts happening at scale, then it becomes a problem, right? And so if you are a parent and you have kids and you work with children, this is something you should already start talking about, right? Seeing, video games is one of the first places where this emerges from, but there are now apps that they're not talking to people. I think in the States we had several incidents where if you talk to someone and the kid is like, oh, I talked to someone, and then that someone is not actually a human, it's actually an AI on the other end. So very important to understand. So apologies, you can't see this slide, but where can I start? So I think the main question for you all would be, where do I actually implement AI ethics within my organization? So I have this ethics and responsible AI canvas starter. It's just to help you kind of put questions, right? Ask questions, start the conversation. So, and if you can't see this, obviously the slide's there, but what's the project overview? What's the purpose and goal of what you're trying to achieve, right? What are your success metrics to apply ethics into your project, right? You need to also take control of that and figure out how are you going to break the KPIs down and track like how well are you applying these metrics into your AI ethics journey, right? So then you have the stakeholder impact, like who is it going to impact? Remember I told you guys in the beginning of the session, is identify those people early. Who is it going to impact? What kind of bias is present for X stakeholder, etc. Then it comes to the data ethics, right? What are other quality measures, potential biases that you have within the construct of the work that you're doing? Safety and security, right? How is your data being stored? How is your, when it comes to cybersecurity, do you guys also have a strategy in terms of implementing cybersecurity to make sure that there's no, hacks? Obviously, US has had tremendous hacks lately because of all the vulnerabilities that are present, right? So making sure that you have safety and security. Transparency, yes, you can't explain a black box, but you can still explain how you're building your systems. Be transparent, right? It's actually best to be open about how your architecture is rather than not doing that. And then testing. I think that's one place that a lot of folks miss is, what was the existing approach? Do you have a baseline, and can you test according to that test line to validate, right? To make sure that whatever you're working on has that. And then create an action plan. I think half the time people do like majority of it, but there's no action plan. Like what am I going to do next, right? And this conversation of AI ethics is a continuous one. It's not one that will stop after you do it once. You should regularly meet and talk about what are some of the new tools, what are the new vulnerabilities. Tools are getting updated, like I said, daily. So are you checking those vulnerabilities? Are you checking what open source packages are coming into play? Like, is that happening? So that is something that you should really focus on. And then have a review process, right? Schedule, update process, and who's the responsible parties for that as well. So this is just to get you started, right? But if you were to take it one more step, is to do an AI risk assessment. And when you do an AI risk assessment, it's about data risks, it's about model and algorithm risks, operational risks, and compliance and regulatory risks, right? So these are 4 areas that I would advise you to look at. And when I talk about risks and implementing AI, you want to take the lowest hanging fruit first and then apply AI to that, obviously, right? So there are many spots in your organization that are low risk. And that's the area you should implement AI first, right? Don't try to implement AI in a high-risk item, because that journey won't end well, right? Been there, done that. But I think it's important to find those low-hanging fruits and do an actual assessment, and then implement AI. And that's actually part of this whole responsible AI piece, is understanding that before implementing. And then assessing the AI risk in your organization. So what are some of the potential AI risks, evaluating the risk, mitigation strategies that you have? In the States, we have assessment frameworks like NIST that come from the government. I'm sure there's, here too, India has government AI responsible policies that they have put in place. Make sure you're aware of those policies, right? I know I read just briefly, but I think here, there's a lot of attention on research, AI research, on what you can and what you cannot do. But there are many frameworks out there, like traditional risk assessment frameworks. And there's also AI risk frameworks available. You can also use other countries' risk frameworks to really see how other countries are doing it, right? Every country is different, right? So when we're applying, when I'm working with different clients from different parts of the world, they have different, policies that they have to follow. Not every country is the same, especially Europe. European countries are one of the ones that are really pushing AI governance and really limiting that innovation to happen. But that also comes at a cost, right? So again, it's a balancing act across the world. So here are some, so every company has AI policies, right? If you read it, not every company abides by their AI policy, unfortunately. One of the examples is Microsoft. Microsoft has a beautiful AI, ethics toolkit. They put all of these responsible policies, but just I think 2 weeks ago, if you're using Microsoft Word, they automatically opted you in to use your data to kind of do whatever with it. So just to raise awareness, right, that's happening. So all companies have these, and I think it's important, but I also would encourage you guys, if you're working at a company, to make sure you have them, but also enforce them, right? So otherwise, there's no point of having AI policies if it can't be enforceable, right? So how AI governance can help mitigate some of these risks, having a governance structure and roles. Have an AI steering committee. So one of the first things that we do when we have these companies is really put up an AI steering committee, an ethics committee, to really understand the organization. Because if you don't do that, then it's really hard to kind of bring people from all parts of the organization and start your AI steering committee. Like what is that going to be for us? Provide that strategic direction and oversight. It's kind of like how we have LACE, right? Lean Agile Center of Excellence. You want to do the same thing with AI. You want to have this ethics center of excellence for AI within your organization. Policies and procedures, right? Develop those policies. Like I said, every company has a list of the policies. Implement procedures to ensure compliance. There's a risk management framework. The risk management framework, all the frameworks that are available. Ethical and regulatory compliance, ensure that AI systems adhere to that. So make sure that whatever you're creating, that you have a strategy on how you're going to adhere to those principles. And then model management and monitoring. So that's more of how do we monitor these models from model shifting, because a lot of models will shift in what they provide based on how they're trained. So even that is its own space when it comes to AI governance, right? So the data scientists, like how those models were trained, what data was fed, what was used to train those models, what compute, what hard. Having that in place will save you in the long run if something goes wrong. I mean, obviously, all of this risk management is to prevent for something to go wrong. So that is why it's important to kind of have some sort of governance framework within your organization. So this is another just a fun guide. Just if you were to make it simple, because I know when we talk about AI ethics, everyone becomes serious, right? And I don't think ethics has, like, when someone says ethics, it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, right? It is just a conversation. So if you just treat it as a conversation and have some actionable items, like, set the North Star, build your dream team, find those AI champions within your organization, right? Create a playbook, right? What are some of the AI do's and don'ts, right? But do this before you go and tell people in your team to go use ChatGPT. Have this conversation, and then have this AI tea time, right? Monthly, just to discuss, what's happening. So if you were to, the previous slide was a little bit more detail, but if you were to abstract from that, just keep it simple, right? Just set the North Star, have a vision, right? Build a steering committee, build your dream team, get the AI champions in, create your playbook, keep it clear enough so your grandma can understand, don't make it complex, right? Because the more complex you make it, the harder it is to follow, right? So keep it simple. Don't complicate Maggie, just like I mentioned in the beginning of the session. So this is there for you. And then the governance journey is a continuous journey, right? So you have the, assessing the current AI practices, developing the governance framework, define the roles and policies, implement and monitor them, ensure the compliance, engage stakeholders, and then the key thing is to educate the stakeholders. And this is kind of repetitive in that it's a continuous cycle. It doesn't end at one point. So that's it. That's all I had for AI ethics. Hopefully you guys found it valuable. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I can take some questions. Yeah.
We have.
Hi, Snehal.
Hi.
Nice presentation. I just have a question on an example on John Deere's recent drop in sales. One case study that presented was a lot of farmers were not buying any more John Deere tractors because of high digitization. You had driverless tractors. Farmers could not repair their tractors, and it was also AI driven, where it was GPS oriented. Well, it could all do it by itself. Harvesting, planting, do whatever agricultural stuff, and has been one of the reasons to drop in its sales, right? So what do you have to do, in such sectors where there is no ask for extensive digitization, or they want to remain in a certain stage?
So yeah, that's a great question. So if you have a company that doesn't need AI or doesn't need the digitization, right, why even bother? And so that just recently happened, right? We, in the US, I don't know if you guys heard about the union strike on the ports, right? We have unionized workers that said, we don't need these AI humanoid bots taking over our job. And so obviously they won at the end of the day. They kept their jobs because they were unionized in that aspect. But I think the question that you had is, like, if you're working for a company that doesn't need AI and you don't necessarily need it, then why, don't even bother. I think the thing where people are getting hung up is that people are trying to apply AI to just everything, and that's not needed, right? Like, you don't need to apply AI to something that is working and is creating some sort of economic value, right? So I think a lot of leaders today are pushing AI in every single direction, but what they're not understanding is what's the repercussion of that. Sometimes they end up paying more for making a decision like that than not making a decision. Hopefully that answers your question.
Hi, Snehal. I have a two-part question. The first one is, if we look at innovation that is happening in this space of AI, India is far behind US and China, right? How are we going to look at that as a metric and improve on that? The second question is about ethics. Now, since that we spoke about ethics, I know we had a conversation already. How can we ensure that China also follows ethics?
That's a
I know
tough question.
other countries are, it's a question for all the countries,
Yeah.
but I'm very specific to China.
Yeah.
No offense, please.
Yeah. Great that you brought up the question. Coming from the U.S. and being a citizen there, I think that's why I said global politics does play a role in this, right? We are competing with China in some aspects, hence what's happening in the U.S. in terms of political nature. But I think to answer your question, like I don't have a definitive answer. I don't know how they would do it, but I think when it comes to ethics, it's up to Jensen said it, right? Every country will have sovereign AI, right? So AI built for their country works for them and does for them, right? So it's that, and that is basically the how you build your policies, your regulations based off of that, right? So I think it's and to the first part of the question, China, India, and I think India has a huge potential because India is going to be, I think, this is my prediction, is that India is going to be huge when it comes to building AI infrastructure. Because you guys have the most data than any country in the world. And AI needs data. So this is the best place to be, right? Especially when it comes, and I think other countries are recognizing that, right? I was just telling some folks earlier that it's quite amazing. Some of the people I've met, they've all come here in the last 4 to 5 weeks. Jensen was here in Mumbai at the NVIDIA AI Summit. Then followed by that, CEO Mustafa Suleyman came from Microsoft, right? Jan LeCun has come here. Arvind Srinivas has come here. So all of these people who are leading the AI space from the States are all coming down here, but because they see potential, right? And the China-US debate, I think that is something that China's on another level. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So no, I think overall globally we will all see benefits as we move, because I think everyone is trying to push AI forward, but are they pushing it responsibly? I think the only countries that are doing that right now, pushing the regulation, is European countries. I mean, they have really put in a lot of work in AI policies, and it's needed, right? I mean, I think that balances the global landscape of how AI is actually being applied in other countries. That's just my 2 cents.
Snehal,
Yeah.
I have a question. While we're using AI to develop some great things like, a self-driven car, or, it'll do my home automation job, what are we setting as an example for the future generation? Are we telling them they don't have to learn how to drive a car, they don't have to be bothered about learning the traffic rules because it's all automated, inside a car? So what would be the future, for my kids especially? Because I do
Yeah.
see my daughter, dependent on ChatGPT to query her answers or to shrink her answers. And she actually argues with me, this looks much better than, what my thought process is, but I'm not very convinced with it. But what example are we setting, with the implementation of AI in various fields, be it designing, be it, doing your regular chores as well, where we have so many automated machines which are coming up. How do we train the next future generation, and what type
Yeah,
of roles they should actually get into?
I think that's a great question, because I get that question all the time, is what do you do for the future generation? And I say this, times are going to change. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years from now, right? Some people in the AI space are saying that, hey, we won't need even a job, and AI will surpass human intelligence with AGI, so on and so forth. But I say this, right? I think we're at a time where future generation will need new skills that we don't even know of yet, right? So there's going to be this delay factor in understanding what those new skills are. But I am already seeing a lot of the young generation focus on the creative aspects, which in my, as I was studying and whatnot, that wasn't an option, right? So being in the creative space, learning how to build, that's why I tell everyone should learn to build. I mean, when I say that, I saw a video of I think it was a 6-year-old using AI to build a software application, and that's unheard of. Like, like if a 6-year-old can do it, I don't think anyone in this room has an excuse not to be able to build, right? And so I think it's important to encourage children to use it, but provide the guardrails, just like I mentioned here. Because even professors in the States are facing this issue where they'll give assignments and the kids are just using ChatGPT or some sort of LLM and trying to. But if you're a smart professor, you will actually ask your students to find the flaw in the actual response that ChatGPT gives, right? So it's like asking a different question and really pushing them in a different horizon even, because I think the future generation have something. I mean, it's great for them to grow up in this environment because they're going to see, just like we saw big innovations happen, I think they're going to see some of the biggest innovations that are happening right now in the world. So it's, again, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, but I think to give encouragement, it's to push them in the right direction, give them the guardrails, and not to tell them don't use it, because that'll keep them behind. So use it in the right way. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, sure.
I just don't want to sound pessimistic, but in India, it's more of consumer-centric. We still don't have a product like a Facebook or a Instagram or a WhatsApp or anything as such. So we're just trying to probably replicate products from other countries and just trying to build this. So a lot of people are coming here because we're a big market. Now, should we focus more on problem solving certain societal or customer problems rather than just copying experiences from different countries and building products, which is probably something how better you can use AI to problem solve rather than just being just consume things.
So I think that is actually one of the biggest things that is needed in AI, right? We have way too many solutions today, but we don't have enough problems to solve with these solutions. So to all the agilists in the room, I think that's an golden opportunity to spend time in saying, what are the AI solutions and what are some of the problems that I can actually apply to solve? Because that is what's going to unlock the actual use case for us to move forward, right? Right now, we have solutions for things using AI that we don't even need solutions for, right? Like we have in the US, the startup market is like, there's products being built for every single thing that you can possibly imagine, but it's not really solving a particular problem. So I think there's a huge opportunity in that problem space to be able to push in that direction. Hopefully that answers your question. Sure. Yeah.
For governance, we use mostly like ISACA governance policies as a standards, whatever the policies, not only for the US specific clients or the projects we apply for that one. But across the globe, it is ISACA is the one which we are using, means till whatever experience I have, I'm using that. But whereas for AI, there was a two policies is released, even though it is not official, from IAP 1 and under this ISACA. ISACA is not officially released anything, only the education purpose it is released something. So my confusion is what needs to be implemented, because some of the policies it's contradicting. When I read IAP and ISACA, it's contradict themselves. So as a governance, I have to implement, then I'm really confused, like what needs to be followed further.
Yeah, and I think that's a question that you should ask your organization in terms of what is the framework we want to follow. There's so many AI policy frameworks, even risk frameworks that are there. Like I mentioned, depending on what sector you're in, if you're in fintech or if you're in healthcare, we have so many different policies that we have to abide by. So it's better to have that conversation with your organization, and obviously they will be contradictory, right? Because they're made and they're built completely different and not keeping the organization in mind. So a lot of times leaders will be like, oh, we want to follow this framework, or we want to follow this framework, this competing. So it's best to have that discussion up front and make sure that's clear, Because without that not being clear, why even build AI policies at that point? Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that's a dilemma that many people face, right? I mean, we face it. Like we have government customers in the States, and we have different policies that we abide by for them, but they're contradictory. So we go back and ask, right? Like, what is it that we really want from this? And that goes back to like the strategy and how you build that strategy. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how to answer that question directly, but I would say that, have the conversation with the people who are making these decisions, right? And be very transparent on what's actually contradictory, and putting together something that's more cohesive for your use case. Yeah. Hopefully that answers. Yeah.
Okay, one more last question. I hope Snehal still has the energy to keep this going. Any more last questions, guys?
On a lighter note, the PPT that you showed, you prepared or used AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the jokes were all AI. The others I actually prepared. So the whole matchmaking game. I actually got some feedback. Shout out to Ketan, who's you guys all maybe might know Ketan Kulkarni. He was just like, for this audience, you sometimes need jokes. So I was just like, let me work through lunch and try to find something, and I put it together. But it worked. I mean, you guys, what was that? Thanks. So yeah, I think hopefully it worked. You guys laughed at it. So
We have Ketan here there.
oh, there it is. So shout out to Ketan for the first 4 slides that I did.
He's so shocked and surprised at the same time. So, Ketan, we were thanking you for giving that comic side to Snehal's slides.
Yeah, I took your feedback on providing some comedy. So yeah,
All right, thank you. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Snehal, for doing this for us, for being a sponsor, and for giving a session on AI ethics. It has been a very interactive session. I hope you all had your questions answered and were satisfied with this.